Yeah, welcome back. You all had an interesting week. But today is November 17th. I got to get off of this thing because it's only going to go downhill for me. But today is November 17th, and it was on this date in 594 AD that Gregory of Tours died. Gregory of Tours, he was the Bishop of Tours at his time. Not really known in the church world, although he is considered the father of French history. He was there during the Merovingian dynasty, which is kind of the western side of France. During from about They were there from about 400 to 600 AD, something like that. Gregory of Tours. There is and I don't know the story here, but there is a famous martyr called Martin of Tours, that he was kind of in charge of the abbey that was covering the spot where Martin of Tours was killed. But that father of French history died on this date in 594 AD. On this date in 1558, Queen Elizabeth I became Queen of England. This is significant because England had gone Protestant because of Henry VIII, and then Henry VIII died, and his son Edward VI, I think, became king, and was king for 6 years, and was continuing with the Protestant way. And then Edward dies, and his sister Mary, who's very Catholic, becomes Queen of England. Queen Mary, Bloody Mary, not Mary Queen of Scots, different person. Bloody Mary becomes queen, and so then you have a bunch of people, a bunch of the Protestants in England leaving England to go to Geneva, where John Calvin is hanging out. And these are called the Marian Exiles, which becomes a whole writing group there in England. Then Elizabeth comes, so Mary only lasts like 5 years. Then Elizabeth becomes the queen. And she does in England what's considered what they call the third way, this way in between the excesses of Mary and the excesses of the Protestants. Although as she got older, she became less and less tolerant of Roman Catholics, so that for a long period of time, I think we talked about this 2 weeks ago, um, if you were a Roman Catholic in England, you were, you know, had a short lifespan. They found ways to get rid of you. But she became queen in 1558 and was queen for something like 45 years, long time. Not the longest. Queen Elizabeth II is the longest. On this date, thinking back to your U.S. history class, on this date in 1734, John Peter Zenger was arrested in New York for libel against the colonial governor at that time. It was a guy named William Crosby. Does anybody remember the Zenger trial? This was something somewhere at some point in your life, if you took U.S. history, you had a question about the Zenger trial, because it's one of the great freedom of the press. He was declared innocent because he was written freedom of the press, and so at some point you had a question, what was the Zenger trial about? You would say freedom of the press, and that's it. So there you go. It was on this date. He was arrested. Getting back to the British, it was on this date in 1785 that the Episcopalian Church was organized in the U.S. So you had the Anglican Church here before the Revolution. Okay, so now we're after the Revolution, and and it's safe for the English to be back in England, back in the U.S. again. And so the Episcopalian Church was organized on this date in 1785. Church of England. In 1855, we kind of talked about this guy, David Livingstone. Remember him? He was the first European on this. Now, this is 15 years before Dr. Livingstone, I presume. This is where he's actually out there doing things. He's the first European, which is to say white person, to see Victoria Falls, which is in Zimbabwe, Zambia. It's kind of on the border there, which I believe is the highest falls in the world. Okay, not been there, not yet at least. But that happened on this date in 1855. 1869, the Suez Canal opened. Did you know it's been around that long? I didn't think it had been around that long, but it's still significant. You guys remember when that ship last year, 2 years ago, got stuck in it, and prices went through the roof because one boat in one canal, so So yeah, 1869, and that's when it was built. Uh, in 1894, H.H. Holmes was arrested in Boston. Anybody read The Devil in the White City? Yeah, he was the devil in The Devil in the White City. He was a serial killer who operated just outside of the World's Fair in 1893 in Chicago, and was actually a rather talkative guy. So what it's sort of like, Al Capone. One of the reasons why we know so much about Al Capone was because he liked the press. He liked to give interviews. He liked to talk, and so they could always. And so did H.H. Holmes, and so we know a lot about him because he liked to talk. But in 1922, the Ottoman Empire ended. The Ottoman Empire ended. This is what we today would consider Turkey, or where Turkey was like this main part of the Ottoman Empire. Sort of like Germany was the main part of the Holy Roman Empire. Turkey was the main part of the Ottoman Empire. The last emperor, Mehmed VI, was exiled to Malta, and the British took over. And this included control of Palestine. So when we talk about the Palestine years, the mandate years, Britain was given a mandate by the League of Nations to take care of Palestine. And so this started the British Mandate, which shortly after, or had become, or was based on the Balfour Declaration, which said that the British, His Majesty's government wants there to be a Palestinian state, or not a Palestinian, a Jewish state in Palestine. That came true in 1948, and they've been fighting about it ever since. Well, they were actually fighting about it before then, but 48 was when the state first opened up. 1933, another movie that I remember fondly, although I did not see it in 1933. I'm not that old. 1933, the movie Duck Soup, the Marx Brothers movie Duck Soup. There's a line. Two things that are funny about that. And if you've ever, has anybody seen Duck Soup? Marx Brothers movie. Okay, so it takes place in the land of Fredonia. And there's a story that Illinois had a senator once, Carol Moseley Braun, who was on a radio interview, and somebody called into this radio interview. Now she would have been during the 1990s, is when she was the senator, and what was the ethnic cleansing was a big thing at that time. I mean, still, I'm not trying to minimize it, but it was going on like in Bosnia and things like that, where ethnic cleansing was an issue. And so somebody called in this radio station and asked Carol Moseley Braun what she thought about the ethnic cleansing in Fredonia, going on in Fredonia. And she just went on and on about how the Fredonians are fighting and this, that, and the other. And of course, people are, Carol Moseley Braun only lasted one term, but be that as it may. The other thing is that I didn't, this has just become part of my vocabulary. So when I was, if I'm talking like giving an example in a classroom and I need a country, I'll use the country of Fredonia. And so I was teaching in a human geography class last year. And again, we're talking about countries and I'm using this Fredonia. And I had a co-teacher in this class, and he's like, "What is this Fredonia you keep talking about?" I'm like, "Man, it's Duck Soup. Have you ever seen it?" No, like, it shows. It shows, And last, a great day in American history. It was on this date in 1973 that Richard Nixon stood up in front of the people of the United States of America and said, "The people of America need to know whether their president is a crook. I am not a crook." So it was a great day in American history. But yes, the "I am not a crook" speech took place on this date, and we won't discuss whether or not he was, in fact, he's passed away, a crook or not. So that's it for this day in history. We'll get back to First Samuel here. And last week we were talking about this battle with the Philistines, where the Philistines were in the north and the Israelites were in the south. We started off by talking about the Israelites being outgunned, outmanned, outnumbered, outplanned. And then Jonathan and his armor bearer have this idea, and I didn't mention it last week, and see that I can do it again. I titled this thing "Crazy Crazy Guys." That's an homage, I don't know, to my father-in-law, Debbie's dad, who that was one of his favorite expressions. Usually when he would see Roscoe and Silas doing, or he would just talk about any couple of people, he would just kind of go, crazy, crazy guys, crazy, crazy guys, kind of thing. And so I thought about these two, armor bearer and Jonathan, going up and crazy, crazy guys, kind of thing. So so Jonathan and his armor bearer decide that they're going to they come up with this plan, and they say, we're going to just go out there in full view of the Philistines, and if they see us and say, come on up, then we're going to go on up, and we're going to think the Lord is going to, that's going to be our sign that the Lord has given them to us. And so they're seen, they go up, and Jonathan and his armor bearer, just in that moment, even after climbing hands and knees, getting up onto this thing, are still able to kill 20 of the Philistine warriors, which sets off a panic in the army, and the army scatters. Jonathan, Saul sees them, what's going on. He figures out, hey, who's behind this? And they realize, well, Jonathan's not here, so maybe that's who it is. We talked a bit about, how nuts this idea was. And I compared it. To me, it's comparable to David and Goliath. David's going up against a giant with 5 stones. Is comparable to Jonathan and his armor bearer going up against 20 or a whole outpost. We just know that 20 of them died. We don't know how many were actually there. But basically what happened is the actions of these two individuals, Jonathan and his armor bearer, resulted in the whole Philistine army taking flight. Okay. And it says at the end of chapter 14, verse 23, so on that day, the Lord saved Israel, and the battle moved on beyond Beth Aven. So the Philistines are in flight, and just like Jonathan had said previously, that nothing can stop the Lord if he wants to save us. And, if we do this, this will be our sign. So Jonathan, I think, just goes out there full in faith, just like David did, and said, let's do this. He did it, and the Lord blessed. So on our note, let's see. Side note, in the middle of this, God sends an earth. We're about 2/3 of the way down. Saul hears of the commotion, finds out who starts it. Then he says, grab the ark. I don't know, where did I get to? Which one did they get to? Did they get to bring the ark? Okay.
The last one that you completed was Hebrews who previously sided with the Philistines suddenly are with the Israelites.
All right, verse 21. Okay. When all the Israelites, these Hebrews who had previously been with the Philistines had gone up with them to their camp, went over to the Philistines, and I made a point to remember this. Remember this point. Okay, just that there are Hebrews who are siding with the Philistines, and then once they see that the Philistines are losing, they switch sides over to the Israelites. Now, beginning, and part of this is he does not, we just noticed, he does not ask to do a sacrifice. He tells the priest to withhold your hand, and he says it's either grab the ark or grab the priest, one of the two, and they go off on this battle. Okay, now, we kind of get a little background here. So verse 24 is where we're going to start today. Okay, so Saul has got his army. He's going to follow in he's going to get ready, and they're massing, and they're going to follow the Philistines. Okay, and Jonathan is still doing whatever, but it says, now the Israelites were in distress that day because Saul bound the people under an oath, saying, cursed be anyone who eats food before evening comes, before I have avenged myself on my enemies. Okay, so none of the troops tasted food. Okay, so we're in the late part of the day. They haven't eaten all day. Everybody's hungry, and Saul is like, all right, let's go. Because Saul, and nobody's eating, everybody's afraid to eat because Saul has put this curse on anyone. Okay, and at, nowadays in 21st century, we think, well, it's a big deal, but this was serious stuff. Okay, I mean, think back to um, Jephthah's daughter. I wanted to say Jehu. Jephthah's daughter in Judges, where he makes this vow. They make these vows that I'm going to do this, and so uh, so Saul makes this vow that, hey, you're going to be cursed if you eat. So no one in the army is eating. Okay, everybody's going on an empty stomach, going to go fight the Philistines. So none of the troops tasted food. The entire army entered the woods, and there was honey on the ground. Okay. When they went into the woods, they saw the honey oozing out, yet no one put his hand to his mouth because they feared the oath. But Jonathan had not heard that his father had bound the people with the oath. Now, why doesn't Jonathan hear this? Why didn't Jonathan hear it? Pardon me? Yeah, he's not there. He's out fighting. He's on a hill fighting, killing off 20 of these Philistines. And while he's, so at some point, Jonathan or Saul makes his vow. Jonathan's off doing his thing. Jonathan gets done. Hey, good day's work. Hey, there's some honey. Let's have some honey. And he does. But Jonathan had not heard the oath, so he reached out with the end of his staff that was in his hand and dipped it in the honeycomb. He raised his hand to his mouth, and his eyes brightened. Okay, so no doubt he's with the group now. Everyone else is operating under this curse, understanding of this curse, except for Jonathan. They're walking along. Jonathan sees honey. He takes it, because apparently there's bees around. Just uses the staff, gets the honey, eats some, and probably everyone is like, because then he says, what happens? Then one of the soldiers told him, your father bound the army under a strict oath. Cursed be anyone who eats food today. That is why the men are faint. So Jonathan is probably going, uh-oh, oops, kind of thing. It's like, oh no. Okay, let's see. Saul tells the, let's see, Hebrews were excited. So the Lord saves Israel, but they're still in distress. I did not fill in what the A is supposed to be. Oh well. For no given reason, Saul binds his army with an oath not to eat that day. Well, I mean, he does say so that I can avenge myself on my enemies. Okay, which is kind of like, okay, Jonathan, Saul, who are you fighting for here? Sort of thing. So again, side note, these three stories, we have and then we're going to end with, this is the second one, and then next week we'll talk about the Amalekites. These three stories are put together as just kind of three stories. The timeline is not strict. It's put together here to kind of say, okay, why isn't Saul king? So this is, why was Saul removed? What was the straw that broke the camel's back? Or what were the processes? What were the events? And I don't think there was any single event, except for the fact that all of these events indicate where Saul's heart was. Okay, so here you've got Saul. Saul says, hey, I'm going to make everybody go hungry so that I can avenge myself on my enemies, kind of thing. Okay, not that he's going to avenge the Lord, but he's fighting for himself at this point, it seems. Okay, I think that's a reasonable conclusion you can draw. But again, this is going to become interesting because even Karen and I were going back and forth by email, and I was talking with Debbie about the whole timeline here of Samuel. It gets a little weird. Okay, but so Saul has made this thing, and Jonathan says, my father has made trouble for the country. Okay, so Jonathan he's probably the only person who can get away with saying this, right? This is not good. This was not a good thing to do. Okay, Jonathan says, my father has made trouble for the country. Okay, Jonathan did not get the message, so when he saw honey, he ate some. Then he's told about the oath, that's why, and he says, my father has made trouble for the country. See how my eyes brightened when I tasted a little of this honey. How much better would it have been if the men had eaten today some of the plunder they took from their enemies? Would not the slaughter of the Philistines have been even greater? Okay, so as a result of this, this is a great victory over the Philistines. But conceivably, looking at this and the way Jonathan is talking, this could have been the battle that ended the Philistines. Okay, I mean, it could have been a much greater battle, but they're constrained because of Saul's desire to put this foolish curse on anyone who tries to eat anything. Okay. But for the oath, would not the slaughter of the Philistines have been even greater? Now, again, it's a battle, it's a victory. There's no question about it. It solved an immediate problem, but because of Jonathan, or because of Saul's um, handling of it, it was limited in what it could have done. And I mean, I think there's, without trying to spiritualize the text, there's a lot of times where we settle for a victory, or I've accomplished this, when you could have done so much more had you just kind of just a little more faith, a little more action, a little more would have. But with it, no, I'm good. It's okay. That's all. I got all I need. We took care of them. They're not at Michmash anymore. We're good. Okay. But for the oath, would not the slaughter of the Philistines have been even greater? All right. Handout, page 2. This is actually today's handout. Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
So Jonathan is saying that would not the slaughter of the Philistines have been even greater? However, that day, verse 31, that day after the Israelites had struck down the Philistines from Michmash to Ajalon, they were exhausted. They pounced on the plunder, and taking sheep, cattle, and calves, they butchered them on the ground and ate them together with the blood. Okay, as unappetizing as this sounds, that's how hungry they were. Okay, so you're in a battle all day, fighting, and then it's like can't eat. I don't know whether it'd be worse than just sitting. Maybe they're just sitting there and not eating, or what. It's like they're not eating, and suddenly they get, okay, we've got stuff to eat. Let's just start eating. I mean, if you have a, I don't. It's never happened at our house where someone has walked in the door from the store and taken something out of the bag and just, you ever done, you don't even take it out of the grocery bag. You just kind of open it inside the grocery bag and just start eating.
You open it in the car. What do you mean?
Yeah. That's management thinking right there. Let me write that one down. Open in the car. Yeah, open in the car. So, but yeah, and so kind of this, they're so hungry. Okay, Saul's avenged, and so maybe that he's been released, and now everybody's just like killing stuff. Now, this is a violation of about a dozen different rules from the Pentateuch. Leviticus 17:10, Deuteronomy 12 say, again, you don't eat raw meat, you don't eat the blood. Okay, you don't do that. Yeah, not kosher, kind of thing. Then someone said to Saul, "Look, the men are sinning against the Lord by eating meat that has blood in it." Now, even Saul realizes that there's a problem here. Okay, even Saul realizes that, oh, wait a minute, this is going a direction I did not. This did not go the direction I wanted it to. Okay. You have broken faith, he said. This is Saul talking. Roll a large stone over here at once. Then he said, go out among the men and tell them, each of you bring me your cattle and sheep and slaughter them here and eat them. Do not sin against the Lord by eating meat with blood still in it. So everyone brought his ox that night and slaughtered it there. Then Saul built an altar to the Lord. It was the first time he had done this. Now, he had given sacrifices, but this is the first time that he had built an altar. Now, once again, this is not his job. Okay, this is not his responsibility to do that. Now, he's got a priest with him. Okay, but so he says, let me see. So because everyone is starving, the soldiers pounce on the plunder and eat it raw. Saul is told the men are sinning against the Lord because of it. And he sets up a rock to properly kill, dress, clean, and eat the meat so that they're within the law. Okay, because he doesn't, he's not completely insensitive to how the law works. Okay. Now he builds an altar, something new for him. The implication is here that he or Ahijah offers a sacrifice, which may or may not have been okay. Okay, I mean, it doesn't say. So again, like I said last week, arguing from the silence of Scripture is great fun, but it's not something to really draw huge conclusions from. Saul says at that point, so he's taking care of this whole getting, eating blood thing. Okay, everybody's fed, everybody's eaten. Okay, I think that a sacrifice has been made at this point, maybe thanking the Lord for the victory, whatever. Okay, he says, all right. Saul said, let us go down and pursue the Philistines by night and plunder them until dawn, and let us not leave one of them alive. So Saul's got some ambition here. Now keep in mind, this is what Saul was hired to do. Okay, Saul was said, hey, we need a king so somebody can, and that's exactly what Saul wants to do at this point. So he's on task at this point. Let's do this. Let's go. Okay. So after everyone is eaten, Saul wants to go back out after the Philistines, but he says, do whatever seems best to you, they reply. This is talking to the people. This is interesting. I haven't had a chance to do this, but this phrase, something along the line of do whatever seems best to you, comes up often in Samuel. I don't know if it's the the Samuel version of you do you, or all right, whatever, but I mean, when Jonathan talks to his armor bearer says, okay, do what seems best to you, my heart is your heart, kind of thing. And it seems a couple of other times it comes out, do what seems best to you. But the priest said, let us inquire of God here. Okay, but the priest said. See, to me, that's like a sermon title right there. But the priest said. Saul's got a great idea. Okay, here's where we're going to go. Let's do this. Let's do this. But the priest said. So at this point, I suspect, again, it's just speculation, I suspect Saul is like, who invited this guy? I got the army. We're all fed. We're ready to go. They're on the run. Let's do this thing. Let's check with God here. Okay, maybe Ahijah is a little worried because Saul's out there building sacrifices, maybe because of all the sin that the Lord, eating the blood has been going on. Maybe he's just a little, Ahijah's like going, okay, listen, I may be from Elijah's family, but I'm still a priest, and I still kind of have to be a little, something's not quite right here. Let's just pause for a minute and check in with the Lord. Okay, always a good idea. Okay, always a good idea. But again, when you're dealing with somebody like Saul, it's not always, good ideas are not always accepted by those in power. So Saul asked God, shall I go down and pursue the Philistines? Will you give them into Israel's hands? Okay, now this is a question asked, and Saul expects a yes. Okay, because this has been his marching orders all along. Get rid of the Philistines. And every other time Saul has God has said, yeah, go take the Philistines, take out the Philistines, get rid of the Philistines. Okay, all through this book, every time the Philistines come up, the Lord is like, did it for Samuel, right? Okay, so he's okay, all right, fine. We'll ask God, so pray to God, and whether Saul is the one doing the praying or, Ahijah is doing the praying, and it's just kind of giving credit to Saul. I don't really know. But they don't get an answer. They're expecting an answer. They don't get one. Now they're expecting a message. They're expecting a sign. They're expecting something. But whatever it is they're expecting, they don't get it. Nothing happens. Okay? But God did not answer them that day. So that it said it doesn't answer them that day, which suggests to me that they're going, this is like an ongoing thing. Like, okay, we're not going to move until we get an answer, until we see this, whatever thing that they're, whether it's the human or the Thummim or the ephod or the wind to blow in another direction, or whatever sign they're looking for, whatever message they're looking, fire from heaven, an angel of the Lord to appear, whatever they're expecting isn't happening. And they're just waiting for it. And they're just waiting for it. And they're just waiting for it. And it doesn't happen. And it doesn't happen. Finally, it gets to the point where Saul realizes it's not happening for a reason. Something's not right. Okay. So up to this point, I mean, Saul is like, hey, I'm cool. Me and God, we're good. But there's got to be something else. I haven't done anything wrong. This is Saul, but somebody's done something. We got to figure out what it is. So Saul asked God, but God did not answer him that day. Saul therefore said, again, this is at the end of the days, said, come here, all you who are leaders of the army, and let us find out what sin has been committed today. Okay, so similar to Joshua 7, right, with Ai and Achan, they figured they lost the battle they should have won. Had to be because of some sin in the camp. I mean, this is something that they thought the Lord had promised them. Well, let's do the same thing. Let's find out who it is. Okay. And let us find out what sin has been committed today. As surely as the Lord who rescues Israel lives, even if the guilt lies with my son Jonathan, he must die. Interesting thing to say. And I think the only reason he says that is because he's absolutely convinced that of all the people that would be holding up a victory, it's not going to be It's not going to be Jonathan. We're here. We're in this position because of Jonathan. The Philistines are on the run because of Jonathan. Okay, surely Jonathan's not the cause. And I think to me he's just kind of saying it's sort of like oh, see, I'm so willing that even if I'm going to take this so seriously that even if it's Jonathan. Okay, I mean, I don't know if you've ever made one of those kind of statements where you're like this outlandish statement and somebody calls your bluff on it, then it's like, okay, So now suddenly he's got, okay, let's and so he's got all the leaders, and I think he's expecting something like Achan in Joshua 7, where they have to go through all the leaders, and it's going to be the last one, and then he's going to find out, it's going to be whatever he's going to do, it's going to be a confession, maybe some punishment. Then we're going to go take out the Philistines. Okay. Saul therefore said, come all here, but not one of them said a word. Okay, because I think they all knew. This is my opinion. Everybody knew John, because that's the kind of thing that spreads, right? Did you see Jonathan's eating? Jonathan's eating. Like you ever work in a company where the boss sets down the law, but the boss's kid works there and the boss's kid doesn't do what he's supposed to do? How many people know about what the boss's kid is doing? Everybody knows. So I think everybody knows. And everybody is sitting there listening to Saul go, even if Jonathan, okay, let's see how this works out. Kind of, everybody knows. That's my opinion. Okay. It doesn't say that, but I'm like, the way human nature works and this kind of thing, I'm thinking everybody knows that Jonathan is the one. The only one that doesn't know is Saul. Okay.
Nobody wants to tell him.
Right. Nobody wants to tell. Yeah. No. I don't know a thing, man. No, wasn't me. That's all I know. Wasn't me. Saul then said to all the Israelites, you stand over there. I and Jonathan, my son, will stand over here. Do what seems best to you. Okay. This to me is like, okay, let's see where this goes. This is going to be good. This is going to be interesting. Okay. So he says, they replied. Then Saul prayed to the Lord, the God of Israel, why have you not answered your servant today? If the fault is in me or my son Jonathan, respond with Urim. But if the men of Israel are at fault, respond with Thummim. Okay, now this is the Urim and the Thummim, which, and again, nobody really knows what these are. Okay, no, they don't. Okay, it's some have said it's like dice, some have said it's like sticks, some said it's something you wear. Okay, we don't know, but it was just some way that the Israelites at this time used to have a sign, like it's sort of like a built-in fleece kind of idea. So something about it. Maybe they rolled maybe they're two dice and they rolled one, and if the human comes up a 5 and the Thummim comes up less, then I don't know. Okay, we don't know, but it was some way, it was some methodology, device, something that was used to divine what God's will was or how God was speaking. Okay, and especially when it was just kind of a binary sort of this or that. You could just this and it would say, okay, based on something about it, it was this or that. Okay, so Saul says, maybe they're just both in a bag, and the priest is going to reach in, and whichever one he pulls out, just blindly, reaching out. Okay, I don't know. We don't know. It's just all speculation as far as what exactly it is, but it worked. Okay, it worked. Okay, so, I mean, throughout the Old Testament, especially the first half of the Old Testament, you hear about this periodically, and it worked. Okay, and the people had faith in it, so that's what matters. Okay, that this was a way that God used to communicate with the people of Israel at that time. Okay, so if the man Saul cast a lot between, okay, then Jonathan and Saul were taken by lot, and the men were cleared. Ooh, this is not good. This is not good. Saul is like going, wait a minute. Because Saul in his mind is convinced that he hasn't done anything wrong. Okay, which is odd because really they're in this whole mess because of Saul. Had Saul not made that vow, they wouldn't be having this conversation. But Saul is like, oh no, I think Saul is convinced that he's absolutely innocent here. Okay. Said Saul prayed to the Lord. I'm sorry, I got this. Saul said, cast the lot between me and Jonathan, my son, and Jonathan was taken. Okay. Well, now the Lord has said, here's what happened. Now again, it was one of those kind of deals where it was a foolish, rash. I guess rash would be the better way to put it. Vow, but at this time, you just didn't do those kind of things. Okay, that this was taken seriously. Okay, and the Lord took them seriously. However, again, we don't know how all the wording. We just know he took a vow. But I'm guessing, or put a curse on them. That he had prayed and he had put the power of God behind this. That hey, you're going to be cursed if you do this. Okay, so Saul was using the Lord here to advance his purposes, to kind of thing, and so the Lord said, all right. You're going to make the rules, and then that's what we're going to play by. Okay. So tell me what you have done. So Jonathan told him. Now this is interesting here because we're just reading it. Okay, we're not hearing it. All right. So it's like, depending on how you read it, depending on how you hear it, it can mean several things. Okay. I tasted a little honey with the end of my staff, and now I must die. Okay. It's like, and now I must die? Now I must die. Okay, is he incredulous? Is he again? And the punctuation marks are not in the text. Okay, is he incredulous? Say seriously, are you serious? You're going to kill me? Or is he saying, okay? Is he like Jephthah's daughter? Okay, well, guess I'm going to die. Okay, so we don't know. It just appears that he understands. Okay, well, I violated this. I was under it, even though I didn't know about it. Now apparently I must die. And Saul, let me go back. Ahijah says, let's check in with the Lord. Saul quickly assumes it's because there's a sin. So he makes another rash vow. Even if Jonathan is guilty, he is going to die. No one of the persons present says a word. Not one of the persons present say a word. Saul is convinced Jonathan is innocent. The people, your teacher believes, that's what YTB means, are pretty certain he's guilty. They cast lots, and Jonathan is found to be the guilty one. Jonathan seems willing to take the punishment. And in verse 44, Saul said, may God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if you do not die, Jonathan. And Saul seems willing to dish it out.
Saul's only about Saul.
Yeah. But again, this story is here to explain why Saul's family is not the king. Okay, so each of these elements are just like jing, 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 another thing to say this is why Saul is not the king. Okay, so it appears to me, my reading of this is Saul is willing to kill his son Jonathan over this kind of thing. Okay, and I suppose you can make the argument that, well, that's just what Saul's job. Saul's job was to get rid of the Philistines, and Jonathan is in the way. And he's willing to take out Jonathan if it's going to get in his way of avenging himself against the Philistines. Okay? Again, not a royal, like when you really think of like, that's a guy I want to follow. Okay? Saul is just willing to do this. Okay? Saul seems willing to dish it out. But the men said to Saul, now this is an interesting thing here. But the men said to Saul, should Jonathan die, he who has brought about this great deliverance in Israel? Like, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be in the position where we could do the coup de grace, that we could really put them away if it weren't for Jonathan. And you're going to kill him? Okay. As surely as the Lord lives, not a hair of his head will fall to the ground, for he did this today with God's help. So the men rescued Jonathan, and he was not put to death. Okay, so on the one hand, this kind of shows the limits of Saul's power, because it's not likely that Saul himself was going to take the sword and kill Jonathan. But the leaders of Israel are standing around, they're going, no, Saul, you're not. You're not going to do this kind of thing. It's a defeat for Saul. It's a reality check for Saul that goes, wait a minute, I overstepped here. Okay. And it isn't a spiritual defeat. I mean, it is, but it's more of a political defeat for Saul. Saul got himself into this situation, and he decided to double down on it. And they called his bluff, and they said, no, that's not going to happen. So in 46, the result?
They didn't say do whatever you will.
Yeah.
Right.
Then the result was in verse 46, then Saul stopped pursuing the Philistines, and they withdrew to their own land. Okay, so here was an opportunity to put away the Philistines, to end the Philistine war. But it didn't end because of Saul's rash vow, Saul's desire to avenge himself, Saul's willingness to kill his own family, to do whatever, to just be vicious in this pursuit, despite the obvious victory that God had given them because of Jonathan. That he would take the tool that God had used to give this victory to Israel and kill him. Okay, the one person in this whole army who had the faith to take God at his word and go after the Philistines, Saul's like, yeah, I'm going to kill him because I made this vow about not eating, and well, okay, and that was it for Saul as far as being an effective leader here. And it's interesting that after this, suddenly in verse 47, rather than continue, the soldiers, the army will not have any of it. Rather than continue the route as he hoped, Saul stops pursuing the Philistines. So the passage, and then after this, in the text, the author gives us kind of a summary of Saul's career. Kind of here's the final word on Saul. So again, I think that this might have been like a separate document at some point. And I think that's typical of a lot of the Old Testament books, that they're not, somebody didn't sit down one day and say, there was a man named Elkanah who had a wife, and I'm going to tell this whole story and just write it all the way through. That somebody told the story of Samuel, and somebody told the Ark story, and somebody told the Saul story, or collected them and put them together. Maybe there was this here. Why isn't Saul, maybe it was a campaign brochure for the David party, kind of send it out. Here's why Saul's family can't be the king. And then put it together, because here you've got this end. Now Saul's not dead, Saul continues on for another 8, 9, 10 chapters in the book, or till the end of the book. But as far as his effectiveness, this is it. And so you get this summary of the life of Saul. And it's good. I mean, it's positive. After Saul had assumed rule over Israel, he fought against their enemies on every side. Moab, the Ammonites, Edom, the kings of Zobah, and the Philistines. Wherever he turned, he inflicted punishment on them. He did exactly what the people wanted. They wanted somebody who was going to lead them in the battle, and that's what Saul did. Okay. He fought valiantly and defeated the Amalekites, delivering Israel from the hand of those who punished them. Now, again, talking about stories and order, because the Amalekite story, now there could have been more than one defeat of the Amalekites. Okay, but chapter 15 is a story about Saul and the Amalekites. Okay, the big, the one, if you've ever heard a sermon about Saul, it's from chapter 15. Okay, but after Saul had assumed rule, he fought valiantly and defeated the Amalekites, delivering Israel from the hand of those who had plundered them. Okay, so he took care of the immediate problem. Okay, not the long-term problem, because when David becomes the king, he's got to deal with the Philistines too. Okay, Saul's sons, and then he kind of talks about Saul's family. Saul's sons were Jonathan, Ishvi, and Malchi-Shua. The name of his older daughter was Merab, and that of the younger was Michael, or could be Michelle. I don't, Michael is how it's typically pronounced. His wife's name was Ahinoam. His wife's name, where am I? His wife's name was Ahinoam, daughter of Ahimaaz. The name of the commander of Saul's army was Abner, son of Ner. Okay, remember that name. He's going to be around for a while. Okay, so we're going to be dealing with Abner. So Abner is Saul's uncle. No, Abner is Saul's cousin. Just like we'll find out that David's cousin is Joab. Okay, so Ner was Saul's uncle. We knew that because we talked about him earlier. It's mentioned earlier that Ner was Saul's uncle, and we thought maybe he's the guy that meets Saul and his servant coming back looking from the donkeys. Okay. Saul's father Kish and Abner's father Ner were sons of Abiel. All the days of Saul there was bitter war with the Philistines, and whenever Saul saw a mighty or brave man, he took him into his service. Okay, so the thing about this is, you think, oh, that's great, right? He was constantly looking for men. Okay, but if you go back to 1 Samuel 8, you see one of the characteristics of Saul, or of the king, was that he's going to take your sons. And so for his whole life, hey, you look like you're with me. You look strong. You're with me. You're with me. You're with me. You're with me. Constantly conscripting people, taking people's sons. Okay. So some of Saul's family members we're going to run into again. Michael especially. Saul we're not done with. Just here they, again, Saul is for the next 13 chapters. I think there's 28 chapters in the book. But next week we're going to talk about 1 Samuel 15. Okay, the Amalekites. This is, like I said, if you've heard a sermon about Saul, it's almost certainly from this chapter. To obey is better than sacrifice. That's from this. That's from the next passage we're going to talk about. Any questions? Yes.
I know the answer, but I can't think of it. What was the origin of the Philistines?
It's, well, I don't know what the word means. I mean, they were in what is now Gaza Strip, that area. And they were seafaring people. And in fact, the word Palestine comes from the same Akkadian, Sumerian, whatever root that the word Philistines comes from. So that's, they were in that area, the lower, what is now the Gaza Strip. So, I mean, draw your own conclusions about there still being problems there. Maybe had Saul taken care of this back here, there wouldn't be a Gaza war today. That's a stretch, okay? It's a stretch. I'll give that to you. But, hey, I can do that, right?
Yeah.
but they're mostly seafaring, and then they kind of started getting big and spreading out into Israel. The Amalekites are to the east, I believe, but we'll get into that next week. All right, thank you very much, and we'll see you next week. Yeah.